You fall. Your leg bends the wrong way. And within minutes a system begins moving around you. A phone calls for help. An ambulance comes. A hospital has clean water, pain relief, trained hands, stored food, and people whose entire job is to keep you alive while you contribute absolutely nothing. Now remove all of it. You are lying on cold ground tens of thousands of years ago. Your group is moving because the animals are moving. You cannot put weight on one leg. There is no stretcher waiting nearby. No antibiotics. No guarantee that tomorrow's camp has food. And every person who stays with you gives up time, energy, and safety. So what happens next? The cruel answer seems obvious. Ancient life was hard. Small groups could not afford dead weight. The injured were probably abandoned. And only the strongest survived. But skeletons from the deep past contain a problem for that story. Some people survived injuries and disabilities that should have made ordinary foraging extremely difficult. Their bones healed. Their bodies adapted. In a few cases, they lived for years. Does that prove compassion? Not automatically. A healed fracture proves that someone remained alive long enough for bone to repair itself. It does not tell us who brought water, who shared food, who slowed the group, or whether anyone helped at all. Some injuries look terrible on a skeleton but may still allow a person to feed themselves. Wild primates sometimes survive damaged limbs without anything resembling a prehistoric nursing service. This is why the real question is not whether an ancient bone looks painful. The question is whether that person could realistically have survived in that environment without other people changing their behavior. One of the most famous tests comes from Shanidar Cave in the mountains of northern Iraq. Around 50,000 years ago, a Neanderthal man now called Shanidar I lived with a remarkable collection of impairments. A crushing injury damaged the left side of his face and probably reduced vision in one eye. His right arm was severely withered, and the forearm and hand were missing. Injuries and arthritis affected his legs and his gait. Then researchers Eric Trinkhaus and Sebastien Villot identified another problem inside his skull. Large bony growths narrowed his ear canals so severely that he probably had major hearing loss. Especially on one side. Try placing that body into a mobile Ice Age group. He may have struggled to locate sounds, follow conversation in noise, detect approaching danger, walk over rough ground, carry heavy loads, shape stone with two working hands, or hunt in the same way as other adults. Any one of those limitations might be manageable. Combined, they become something else. Yet Shanidar I did not die immediately after the injuries. He survived into older adulthood for a Neanderthal. Probably around his 40s. The damage healed. The degenerative conditions had time to develop. What kept him alive? Perhaps others regularly shared food. Perhaps they helped him cross difficult terrain. Perhaps he stayed near camp and performed tasks that demanded knowledge more than speed. Perhaps his role changed instead of disappearing. The bones cannot show us a bowl being handed from one person to another. They cannot show affection, but Trinkhaus and Villot argued that the combination of sensory loss, limited mobility, and damage to one arm strongly indicates a supportive social environment. That is much stronger than saying, he broke a bone and lived. It also changes the meaning of usefulness. A person who could no longer chase prey might still repair tools, prepare hides, watch children, maintain fire, remember routes, recognize weather, teach younger people, or notice details that faster bodies ignored. We cannot prove which role Shanidar I performed. The point is that ancient contribution was probably not measured by one job. But Shanidar is not the oldest clue. At Dmanisi in Georgia, a team led by David Lord-Kapanidze studied a skull and jaw from an early member of the human genus who lived about 1.77 million years ago. This individual had lost all but one tooth and survived for years after most of the tooth sockets had closed. Without teeth, tough raw food becomes a serious problem. So how did this person eat? One possibility is direct help. Group members may have shared softer pieces, marrow, brain tissue, or food processed into a form that required little chewing. Another possibility is that the individual selected soft foods independently. The fossil raises the possibility of social support, but it does not force that conclusion. This uncertainty matters. If every impaired skeleton is automatically called proof of compassion, The argument becomes emotional rather than scientific. But if we refuse to consider care unless archaeology preserves the caregiver's hands, we create an impossible standard. Soft tissue disappears. Food disappears. Daily assistance almost never fossilizes. Researchers therefore use a method sometimes called the bioarchaeology of care. Lornett Tilley and Mark Oxenham framed the problem by asking what a person's condition would have prevented them from doing, what their community's way of life demanded, and what assistance would have been necessary for survival. That method does not read feelings from bone. It reconstructs practical dependency. Could the person move? Could they obtain food? Could they swallow it? Could they maintain body temperature? Could they avoid pressure wounds? Could they travel when the group moved? The more essential tasks a person could not perform alone, and the longer they survived, the stronger the case that someone else repeatedly paid the cost. Then a skeleton from Liang Tebo Cave in Borneo pushed that logic much further. In 2022, Tim Maloney and a large research team reported the remains of a person whose lower left leg had been deliberately removed at least 31,000 years ago. The cut was not the ragged result of an animal attack. The tibia and fibula showed remodeling over the amputation surfaces. The person survived the operation and lived for another 6 to 9 years. This was not simply an injured person who managed to crawl away. A successful amputation requires the patient to survive blood loss, shock, contamination, pain, and a long period of reduced mobility. In a tropical environment, infection would have been an enormous threat. The individual would have needed repeated attention after the dramatic moment was over, when the wound still required protection and the group still needed food. The most impressive part is not the cut. It is the years afterward. Someone had to know enough to remove the limb without killing the patient. Someone had to keep the wound clean enough to heal. Someone probably fed, moved, protected, and accommodated that person during recovery. The care was not one heroic afternoon. It became part of ordinary group life. And that is the historical reversal. Care was not necessarily a luxury that ancient people practiced after survival had become easy. In social humans, care itself may have been part of the survival system. A group that helps an injured hunter does spend food and time. But it may preserve a skilled toolmaker, an experienced tracker, a parent, a source of ecological memory, or simply a trusted relationship that holds the group together. More importantly, every healthy member knows that their own value will not vanish the instant they become vulnerable. What happens to cooperation when nobody expects help after an accident? People take fewer shared risks. Trust becomes fragile. Knowledge dies with injured bodies. Parenting becomes harder. Hunting, defense, food sharing, and travel all depend on people believing that the group is more than a temporary arrangement among perfectly healthy adults. This does not mean every ancient person was rescued. Some injuries killed too quickly. Some people were attacked by other humans. Some groups may have abandoned members during famine, flight, conflict, or dangerous migration. A person injured far from camp might never have been found. Archaeology cannot calculate an ancient abandonment rate, and it certainly cannot prove that all prehistoric communities followed one moral rule. There is also a dark sampling problem. We mainly recognize care when the body survived long enough to record healing. A person abandoned immediately may leave a skeleton that looks exactly like someone who died alone for another reason. Absence of healing may mean abandonment, but it may also mean the injury was instantly fatal. So did ancient humans leave the injured to die? Almost certainly. It happened sometimes. Human groups have never been uniformly gentle. And prehistoric life did not remove fear, violence, scarcity, or difficult choices. But the stronger answer is that abandonment was not the automatic rule. Across very different times and places, from early Homo at Dmanisi, to Neanderthals at Shanidar, to modern human foragers in Borneo, we find individuals who survived conditions that challenge the idea that ancient societies discarded anyone who could not keep up. The evidence varies in strength. Dmanisi is suggestive. Shanidar 1 makes sustained social support highly plausible. Liang Tebo makes prolonged care extremely difficult to deny. The phrase, survival of the fittest, has quietly misled us here. Fitness does not mean the strongest isolated body. In a social species, Fitness can include the ability to form a group that carries knowledge, food, children, risk, and injured people across time. Modern medicine makes this ancient behavior look institutional. Care now arrives wearing uniforms, carrying equipment, and working inside buildings filled with machines. That system is one of the greatest protections modern life has created. But the system can hide the older mechanism underneath it. Before care was a profession. It was another person adjusting their pace. It was food divided one more way. It was a camp remaining in place longer than planned. It was a useful role redesigned around a damaged body. You fall today, and a system begins moving around you. Long before the ambulance, the oldest part of that system may have been a human being who saw an injured person on the ground and did not walk away.